I'd like to welcome you all tonight to our senior college class on solar panels.
That's what we said.
Dale Roy. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Dale Roy, who started his electrical and electronic training in the Navy, where he operated and maintained the electronic equipment which control the reactor plant on board submarines for 12 years. Dale left the Navy after working for a utility company here in the area. During this time, he obtained his electrician license and his NASA, which is Northern American Board of Certified Energy Practitioner Certificate. He started his own electrical business, DR Electric, and in 2008 started his solar business, Maine Solar and Wind. As of today, Dale has installed over 100 solar systems. Please welcome Dale.
So we'll keep this informal as possible, so if you got questions, just interject. Before I start, my wife said, Dale, you know, not everybody's a geek like you and appreciates the shit you appreciate, right? So I appreciate it. So I said, well, they're at senior college, so they're here to learn, right? So I'm going to teach you something tonight. Okay? So like I said, I started off, when I left high school, I went into the Navy, the nuclear power program. I learned about it when I was a freshman in high school. I think it was in Popular Mechanics magazine, and it talked about the Navy's nuclear power program and how awesome it was. It was a 6-year enlistment because the first 3 years is just schooling. And it's not like college schooling. You're like literally, 60 hours a week in school, in class learning. So the first part of that was learning electronics for the first year, and then I went to Orlando for nuke school, which you learn reactor principles and heat transfer fluid dynamics and metallurgy, etc. And then after a year of that, I went up to Balsenspa, which is a little town next to Saratoga Springs, New York, where they actually have reactor plants set up just like submarines. So it was classroom at first, then it was hands-on on an actual reactor plant. So I was a nuke ET, so basically I operated the equipment and maintained all the electronic equipment that controlled the reactor, but I also was the reactor operator. So I also shut down the reactor, started up the reactor, we did drills. Anyway, so there was also mechanics and electricians. Those are the 3 rates that control the reactor plant on subs. I was stationed on a ballistic missile submarine, so I spent 5 years I got picked up as a staff pickup, which means I taught other students for 2 years. So it was 5 years in Navy before I went to my first submarine. And first submarine was a ballistic missile submarine called the Alexander Hamilton. It's been since decommissioned. I was stationed in Groton, but the submarine was actually in Holy Loch, Scotland. And we'd fly out there and swap crews. It's a 2-crew submarine, so we do 3 months on, 3 months off. And then I went from that to the NR-1, which is the only nuclear-powered deep submersible the Navy ever made. It was only a 13-man crew. We had wheels at the bottom of the submarine. We'd land on the bottom of the ocean. We had an arm basket so we could take samples. It was a Cold War top-secret submarine. It did a lot of operations that were top-secret in the Cold War. Because it could land and it could go in very, very shallow water, so it could basically go in any ports, literally drive right to the pier, and they wouldn't even know it's there. And then I went to the Groton, which is a fast attack submarine, and I got out of the Navy. When I got out of the Navy, I went to work for an electrician in Presque Isle, and I got my electrical license, my master electrician license there. I used all my hours that I had in the Navy, so basically I just went from nothing to master, and I took the test and became a master electrician. And I was working in Presque Isle, but I got the opportunity to move to Fort Kent, which I did. So I worked for Maine Public for 8 years, and I was just so busy doing electrical work. I said, something's got to give, so I got to do something. I got to do one or the other, and I got a job, Martin's in Madawaska. They hired me to do, to convert it to Martin's. I said, well, this is the time. So I did. I made the switch. Honestly hated working for a union. If there's any union worker, I apologize, but I'm just like, I like to stay active, I like to work, I don't like to, whatever. So, after that, yeah, so I formed, I had a job doing working on an off-grid system somebody hired me to do, and I fell in love with the work because it's a little bit more technical than wiring a house, which gets boring after a while. So, fell in love with it, and I got my NADSET certification, which is, at the time, I was only 1 of 7 in the state. I am still the only one north of Bangor that's actually certified to do solar. You may find some names that are out there doing solar, but none of them are certified. It's an extremely hard exam. So to this day, I think there's 25 people in the entire state that are certified in NADSET. Huh?
What is certified?
It's an exam that's specifically for solar installation. It's called North American Board of Certified Electrical Practitioners, and it's the certification for solar nationwide. Just like a master electrician, everybody knows a master electrician. If you're talking solar, that's the certification you
Do
need.
you have to have your master electrician to become?
Yeah, you don't have to have it to become, but if you work on a solar system, you have to be an electrician.
Okay.
So, yes, basically. So that's that. So it takes me here, pretty much. So I've been installing systems for a while, off-grid, on-grid, whatever. So today I'm going to talk about solar, but before I get to this thing, we're going to talk about the engine, right? So what powers solar? The sun, right? We're going to talk about the sun because it's that's where you talk solar power, you're not really talking about, solar panels don't produce electricity. They just convert it from the sun's power to electricity. They're just a conversion method. So, does anybody know what the sun is? What is the sun? Huh?
Where it is?
No, what it is.
Oh.
Any idea?
Helium.
Huh?
Hydrogen.
Yeah, it's made up of like 91% hydrogen. It is, but it's a big nuclear reactor is what it is. So it's a fusion reactor. So we'll talk about that in a second. I know this is like maybe overwhelming for you guys,
Oh, this is,
but
not at all. It's for us.
I'll take it slow.
For us.
I'll take it slow. But so yeah, the sun is a big fusion reactor. So I want to talk about a little bit about I'm a nuke, so I operate a reactor plant, so I'm kind of geeky, and I love to talk about nuclear power. So we're going to talk about nuclear power a little bit, and I'm going to blow your mind a little bit. So this is a pen, right? How much energy do you think is in this pen? Anything?
There's energy everywhere.
Oh, yeah, but let's talk about this pen.
Okay.
How much potential energy is in this pen?
Why, when you burn it or what?
Burn it, whatever. Any idea? Do you think this could power your house for a day or a minute or anything? No? Okay, I'm going to tell you right now, this pen could power your house for 3,700 and some odd years. And I'm going to prove it to you. Okay, so, if all the mass, okay, so Einstein's theory of relativity basically states that energy and matter are the same. It's one or the other, right? Everybody's heard of the Big Bang. Well, when the Big Bang happened, all matter appeared. So basically from that concentrated point of energy, the singularity, from that explosion, matter was created. Okay, so this little pen here is about 1 gram, okay? So 1 gram. So does anybody know that theory? Does anybody know? No, I'm probably not. I'm sure you've heard of this, though, right? E equals mc squared, okay. So this is energy, it's in joules, okay? So joules is a watt second, same thing. So we're gonna get to watts, right? M is matter, okay? So in kilograms actually, okay? And C is the speed of light squared. So the speed of light is a humongous number, right? So speed of light is 671 million miles per hour. That's how fast it travels, wicked fast. And we're gonna need it in meters per second. So it's 300 million meters per second. Okay? So let me, I got all my calculations here pointed out. Okay, so we're gonna figure this all out here. So, so it's this pen has about 1 gram. So remember I said this is in kilograms. So it's 0.001 gram is a kilogram. So 1 gram is equal to 0.001 kilograms. Times the speed of light, which is squared, so it's going to be 9.0 times 16, 10 to the 16th power. So it's a lot of zeros, right? So when you multiply 9 times 10 to the first is basically 9 times 10, right? So that's 90. So times 10 to the second, right, is 90 times basically 100. So 10 twice, so that's like 900. So it's just the amount of zeros. You got 2 zeros there, power of 10, power 2. Okay, and where are we at? Okay, so if you multiply this out, you're gonna get a crazy number, right? 9000000000000. Okay, watt seconds. Okay, and then we're going to divide watt seconds by 1,000 because we want kilowatts. Okay, so we're going to multiply that divide that by 1,000, and then there's 3,600. We're also going to divide it by 3,600 because there's 3,600 seconds in an hour. So we want to get to kilowatt hours. Okay, so it ends up being 25,000 or 25 million kilowatt hours. So that 1 gram item, this one little pen, has 25 million kilowatt hours if we could convert it all to mass. All this matter into energy, which we can't, right? We don't have the technology yet. You ever watch Back to the Future? They had the little reactor on the car, and they kept throwing bananas in there and all kinds of shit, right? Because it's the same principle, right? So it has a lot of energy. So a typical house uses around 600 kilowatt hours per month, and we figure that out. 12 months, times it by 12 months. Anyway, you ended up with 3,472 years. So that's the power. That's the power of nuclear power. It doesn't take a lot of matter to get a lot of energy. So in the Navy, I'm going to erase all this. You guys got questions on that? It's pretty crazy, right? Pretty crazy.
That was a test.
No, there's no test. There's no test. So on like a submarine, we use uranium-235 because it's a heavy element, so it has a lot of, you know what's an atom, right? There's protons and neutrons in its nucleus, and then it has a bunch of electrons in orbits around it. So that makes up, that's what an atom is basically. And this has 92 protons, 143 neutrons sitting in there, and what happens in a nuclear reaction is there are going to be some little neutrons floating around in there, and they'll come in here and disturb the nuclear force that holds us together. These are all positively charged. So positive, like charged items, like a bunch of positive things together, want to repel each other. Just like magnets, when you put both poles of the same pole together, it wants to repel each other. So these little protons here really want to just blow apart, but there's a force in there that holds them together. It's called the nuclear force. We won't get into that, but when you throw in another neutron in there, it just causes it to get all fuddy-duddy. It loses its nuclear force, and it just blows apart. And you end up with cesium and strontium plus 3 neutrons, so you get its atomic, its number is, the total here is 229 atomic mass units compared to the 235, so there's a change of 6 atomic mass units, which is nothing but that's the mass that gets converted to energy in the reactor. That's where you get your power from. So in the Navy, this is, I shouldn't be saying this on camera, but in the Navy, on a submarine, you think it's a huge reactor that powers that thing, right? It isn't. It's the size of a 55-gallon drum. And 90% of that is space. It's water and space between the fuel cells. And there's control rods in there that absorb those neutrons or release neutrons to control it, whether you're on an increased power or lower power. It's the size of a 55-gallon drum, so if you're going to take the fuel out of there, just the uranium-235 probably had a paint can full. Okay, and that paint can full of power can power, a submarine has about 1 million shaft horsepower, so it's about 1 million horsepower submarine. And it'll power, that 1 can full of uranium will power that submarine for 15 years without refueling. A long time. The thing that's mind-blowing about it is when you're After 15 years, you look in the paint can and it's still 90% full. You only use 10% of your fuel. So, I mean, basically, a little bit of fuel, power a submarine at 1 million horsepower for 15 years. So it's extremely powerful.
Are all submarines, do
Yes.
they all work like this?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
That's interesting.
All submarines are nuclear powered.
What are the hazards? Are there?
Never had an incident other than a sinking pressure.
That's not this.
But no, it wasn't because of reactor problems, a seawater leak. But there's never been an incident because guys are really well trained and they know how to. And it's a stable reactor. It's a pressurized water reactor, so it's inherently stable. As water gets hotter, it gets less dense, so it absorbs less neutrons. More neutrons escape the core, and it'll actually reduce power down. So it's actually self-controlling in a sense. About 95% of the guys controlling the civilian power plants are ex-Navy nukes like myself. I didn't want to go into it because I'm from Frenchville originally. I like to go hunting and fishing back then, and I hated being inside all the time. So I
How
said,
often were you tested for radiation?
and we wear a little,
Badge.
it's called thermal, yeah, it's thermal luminescent dosimeter is what it's called.
Yeah.
And we get that tested every once a month. And we actually, on a submarine, we get less radiation than we do out here. Yeah, in the sun or even from radar on the ground and stuff like that. It's very low levels. So yeah, so I mean, this is way off topic, but it isn't. I just wanted to show you the power of nuclear energy, right? So in the sun, this is the reaction that happens. So you got to, like I said, it's correct. Mostly made of hydrogen, it's 91% and 8.9% helium and 0.1% other things. So you got 4 little helium, hydrogen atoms floating around in there, and you need a lot of pressure and a lot of heat. So the pressure inside the sun is 260 billion times the pressure that we feel now at atmospheric pressure. So it is, I mean, if you ended up in the middle of the sun, you would turn into a little speck of sand because you would be so compressed. I mean, it would just be crazy. So much pressure and so much heat, 27 million degrees in the center of the sun, extremely hot. So it forces those hydrogen atoms to fuse together, so giving us a fusion reaction. So it'll give us, you'll take 2 of them, and one proton becomes a neutron, and you get H2 basically. And then we add a proton from this reaction here, this goes up here, and we get helium-3, which is 2 neutrons, 1 proton. It doesn't really like that. It likes to be stable. It likes to have pairs. It likes to have 2 neutrons, 2 protons. So this reaction happens twice. We get helium-3 floating around in there, and when that reaction happens, it gives us this little guy. Does anybody know what that little symbol is for? It's a little, anybody know what that is? It's called a gamma particle. It's also called a photon, and it's also called light. Okay, that's the light that's being generated from the sun. That's what you're seeing, this little guy right here. Okay, and you combine those two helium-3 atoms to helium-4, which is stable. It loves it. That's what it likes to be at, and it gets rid of 2 protons and a bunch of energy. So the bunch of energy comes from this difference, right? So if you look on your periodic table over here, might as well bring this up. So if you look at hydrogen, right? That one above there is called the atomic numbers. It's basically just a number of protons that are in the nucleus. But underneath at the bottom it says 1.008. That's the atomic mass unit, or the atomic mass of hydrogen. So if we multiply that 4 times, you end up with 4.032 atomic mass units. The weight, if you look at helium, which is just way over here, it's 4.026, so that change of 0.006 atomic mass units, that's where the energy comes from. That mass is changed to straight up energy. A little bit about the sun. It takes, when you look into the sky, a lot of people don't realize this, when you look into the sky, what are you actually looking into? Does anybody know? You look into the past. You look into the past, because the sun, when you look at the sun, the actual light that you're seeing actually takes 8.5 minutes to get to your eyeball from the sun. So you're actually looking, when you look at the sunlight, it's actually 8.5 minutes old. The nearest star is 4.3 light years away, Alpha Centauri. So it takes 4.3 years from the light of Alpha Centauri to get to your eyeball. If you're looking at it in a telescope, that's already 4.3 years old, and that's the closest one. Some of them are 1 billion light years away. So you're looking, if you look at like Hubble, it's looking back billions of years ago, what the sky looked like billions of years ago, because that's how long the light took to get to Hubble. So it's a pretty crazy concept. So this little guy here, this is another little crazy concept. This little guy here, that little alpha particle, that's light, that's what the sun generates. Do you know, from the time of creation, right here in the center of the sun, do you know how long it takes for you to see that little guy? Any guesses? Give me a guess. No guess? Come on, somebody give me a guess. Throw out a crazy number. Come on. No? It takes 200,000 years. It takes 200,000 years for that little alpha particle being generated in the sun right now to get to your eyeball. Because what happens is, when it's created in the center of the sun, first of all, the sun is huge, right? It's, I think, 11 million Earths in it. Yeah. No, 1.3 million Earths in the sun. That's how big it is. It accounts for 99.8% of all of the matter in our solar system. Jupiter, you think it's a huge planet, but it actually only holds 11 Earths. So this thing is massive, incredibly massive. Do you know what Jupiter is? Jupiter is a sun that never happened. Because Jupiter actually has all the, Jupiter is a hydrogen mass, just like the sun is. It just doesn't have enough of this. It's not big enough. Right? So the reason why there's so much pressure is because how big the sun is. So Jupiter is just not big enough to actually start the fusion reaction and become a sun. So, yeah, so it takes 200,000 years. Is that crazy? So that little particle bounces around the sun until it gets to this corona, and then it escapes, and then we see it 8.5 minutes later. But it's generated 200,000 years ago. So that's how old that light is that you're looking at.
So why does it escape?
Why does it escape?
Yeah.
It just escapes by chance. It just bounces around there until it gets to the corona, then
So if gravity is,
Gravity-
the sun has gravity,
this has almost zero mass. It has no mass. There's almost nothing. So it has no gravitational effects. So it just bounces around in there and eventually gets to the corona. Yeah, good question. Okay, so where am I at on this little thing? Okay, so yeah, that's cool. The sun every day converts 700 million tons of hydrogen into 695 million tons of helium. So every day this reaction is happening on a grand scale. So 5 million tons of matter is being converted to energy, right? So 700 million tons, yeah, 700 million tons of this ends up with 695 million tons of this. So 5 million tons is being turned into energy. So the sun generates enough energy in one day to electrically power the whole world for 5,652 days, or 5,652 years. So that's how much energy the sun puts out every day. That 5 million.
Where have we been?
I know, it's crazy.
Why has it taken this
I know, it's
so
crazy.
long?
It's the harnessing of it's the problem. So we only harness, right now, only 0.5% of the world is powered by the sun through solar energy. So we're a long ways away from actually using, the power. So obviously the most abundant energy on Earth, of course, the sun. So yeah. So now, any questions on this? I know it's like pretty mind-blowing.
Who's using the most solar in the world?
That's a good question. I know Germany uses a lot. As far as per capita. Yeah. Go ahead.
Will there ever come a time, you said that right now we're using maybe 1 to 35%, but if the whole world converts to solar powered devices, will there ever come a time where we'll start depleting the sun's resources or the heat from the light, and it will actually start losing its effectiveness?
No, hold on a second. Let me answer that. Let me look at something real quick. The sun is going to collapse in 6.5 billion years from now. So the sun's going to be around for a long, long time.
Whether we use it or not?
Whether you use it or not, right? So the sun basically was formed because of a giant gas nebula, they call it. So it was just a bunch of gas, and it was just starting, churning and turning and getting more condensed, more condensed, more condensed, more condensed, until it got to that pressure and temperature, that magic number, and poof, turned on. So
Was Jupiter once a sun?
no, it was never a sun. But it could be bigger, it would be a sun. Really, all be dead.
Could a sun as big as our sun spill out something like Jupiter?
No, it couldn't. It can only spit out particles, basically. The sun is actually like a plasma, so it's like a superheated gas. So it's just a liquid churning plasma. It does do like mass ejections, which
flares.
screws up, flares. And northern lights, that's what that is. So it's just particles being ejected from the sun. So it doesn't really eject like hydrogen or anything. Those are like, because they have mass, so they're locked in there. It can only eject particles because particles have no mass and they'll escape. Okay, so any questions on the sun? I think I'm done that part. You guys need a break? You're all set? So let me try to hit everything before we move on. So I'm going to move on to solar energy here. So we'll talk about that. So we'll talk about, first of all, what kind of solar energy there are, what different types. So there's solar systems, basically. So I'll talk about the solar panels, how that actually converts the sun's little photon over here to electricity. But there's grid-tied, off-grid, and hybrid systems. So a grid-tied system is, most of the systems you see going up are all grid-tied. They're directly connected to the utility grid. This solar panel produces DC power. Every solar panel produces DC power. Sometimes they have little in-phase individual inverters on them that actually can put out, each panel will actually put out AC, but it still has a little unit in the back that does the conversion. But every solar panel produces DC. That goes to an inverter on an off-grid system. That goes to an inverter. That DC gets converted to household energy, or like it could get converted to three-phase 277 480. You can get converted to your house energy 120 240, and that gets tied right into an electric panel or right directly to the grid, pretty much via disconnect. So there's no batteries, there's nothing. It's just solar panels, inverter, grid. So the concept of that system is if you as a homeowner decide to install that, it would offset your electric bill. You don't get paid for the power. They'll bank it, so a lot of times you have a system that's I designed a system so that you'll bank the energy in the summer, and then you'll have extra banked come September, October, and you'll use that through the winter, because winter the days are shorter. You actually generate more power in the winter when it is sunny compared to the summer, because solar panels love the cold. The colder the better. And when they're hot, they don't like to conduct electricity. Just like your computer, it needs to be liquid cooled. Some of them need to be cooled. They have fans. Some of them have liquid cooling because they keep it colder, it operates faster. Same thing with solar panel, right? It's the same.
Do some systems use battery backup?
Yeah, I'll tell you about that kind of system in a second. Yeah. So grid tied, just solar panels, inverter, the grid. Off-grid systems, that's where basically you have a camp in the middle of the woods, which I have a lot of those systems. I don't know if you're familiar with Clayton Lake or all the wardens, the gates in the woods. Anyway, I do most of the, pretty much all the work in the North Main Woods, all their systems out there that goes on. But anyway, if you're away from power, you can never run power there because it's miles and miles away. You'll do a grid tied system, an off-grid system. So basically you have solar panels the same way, and solar panels go to a charge controller, they call it. So it actually doesn't even get put to the inverter. It goes to a little charge controller, and basically that controls the charging of the battery. So it'll take the DC power from this guy, which usually I string a whole bunch in series. So in other words, just like taking a battery, if you take a 12-volt battery and connect it to another 12-volt battery in series, you'll end up with 24 volts. So the solar panels do the same thing. I connect them all in series, and you get high voltage, sometimes 600 volts. And but in an off-grid system, typically tie 3 together and get about 120 volts. And that goes to a charge controller, which converts that voltage to whatever your battery bank is set at. So a typical battery bank I set at 48 volts. So it converts it, it takes care of charging the battery bank only. Separate from the solar system, you'll have an inverter, and that inverter will take the power from the battery, convert it to 120 to 40 for your house.
Do you lose anything when you convert from DC to AC and vice versa?
Yes, yeah, there are inherent losses, yes. It's not 100%. Yeah, there are losses, system losses, usually like 8%. So. And then all inverters have a certain efficiency. They operate typically around 97% efficient, just that. So just that conversion, plus all your wiring, and so you're losing a little bit. So you take that into account. The next system is a hybrid system, they call it. So some people, I've only installed one hybrid system, not popular. I don't recommend them because they're extremely expensive. So batteries are very expensive. Typical battery bank for a half decent camp, you're talking $12,000, just the batteries. It's a lot of money. Yeah, one battery, I usually sell the big L16s, they're like this tall. It's a big battery, twice the size of a car battery. That battery there is around almost $700. It's crazy expensive.
How long do they last?
About 9 to 10 years. Yeah, they last a while. They last a lot longer than your typical car battery. So a lot of times clients will say, oh, I got an Interstate, I only paid, I do sell like solar size car batteries too. They're kind of like a car battery, same size, but those still like $350, $400. But I have clients that say, oh, I checked the price on Interstate battery. Yeah, but that's like 5 years. I'm getting double that. That's why mine, it's more expensive, but it's not twice the price, so it's still better to try the solar battery. But anyway, so hybrid system, just only install one, and it's basically a house is connected to the grid, but also has a battery bank for backup power. And if they over-generate solar, it will still feed into the grid, but it'll make sure, first, it'll always take care of the battery bank. So make sure the battery bank is charged, and then it'll feed into the grid. Grid power goes down, and it kicks on. The inverter switches to the batteries and feeds the house from the batteries. Sounds great, but batteries are very expensive. You're better off just getting a generator. A lot cheaper, yeah.
Yeah, but if you don't have a battery back, you have solar panels, and then the grid loses power,
You lose power.
you lose power.
Yeah, because grid-tied inverters, they have to, they're UL listed to turn off power within milliseconds of the grid turning off. And the reason they do that is because they don't want your system to feed on the grid after the grid goes down and kill linemen out there. You know what I mean? So it senses grid power. If grid power goes down, it shuts off right away. So, and that's to protect line workers. So make sure that they don't get killed. I'll have a little story. When I worked at Maine Public, we were working in Eagle Lake, we're changing voltage on the line. Usually it's 7,200 volts on the line, and we were going to 20,000 volts. So anyway, we're changing all the transformers in town, and we heard a generator running in a house, and we had to power off to the whole town. So we're changing all the transformers in the whole town. And then we kicked power back on, and all we heard was boom. And we're like, what the hell was that? So we start driving around, and so this guy had a generator set up, and he was connected to a breaker in his electrical panel, but didn't have a transfer switch. And you had generators, but a transfer switch basically forces you to disconnect power from the grid and have your electric panel fed from the generator, so you can't feed back to the grid. Well, this guy just was hot wired into his electrical panel. So when we turned power back on, and he could have killed one of us because, I mean, he was feeding back into the grid, but when we turned power back on, we fed his generator. The generator blew up, caught the garage on fire. The transformer blew off the pole. The top of the transformer flew over the top of his house. So yeah, so don't do that. Make sure you get an electrician to install your generator. Don't be half-assed. Huh?
Is he liable for that?
Yeah, well, back then, we called it Christopher meeting, so yeah, we just changed the transformer. But his garage caught on fire, so he had enough problems. And he needed a new generator. So, but anyway, okay, so I'm gonna go and we're gonna hit this thing here and how this thing works, okay? So it looks a little complicated, so that's what this is. Okay, so it's made of silicone. So if you look in here, I don't know if you can see it pretty. Yeah, we can see it. So this is a 122.5 cell panel. So that just means that these cells are actually half a cell. Usually they're bigger. So, but anyway, so this little, you see where the little wires are in here?
Right.
I don't know if you guys can see that. It's hard to see that. There's like a square box here, right?
Yeah.
That's one cell. So that's one silicone wafer, and then they're all tied together with these tiny little, they call them fingers, but they're all little tiny wires all they're connecting them all together. So one thing about a solar panel is if I would put my arm across this thing and shade a certain section of this, it kills the power in the whole thing. So that's why shading is so bad. So if you have, like, you know, a lot of my systems have 15 panels in series. So they're connected one after the other. So the positive one goes to negative with the other. Just connected all this, generates crazy. Like this panel has, it's 33.6 volts. So expose it to the sun, you'll check the voltage, you get 33.6 volts. But I connect them all 15 in a row, and it generates about 600 volts. That's 15 times 33, whatever. So it generates high voltage. So if you have one panel in that string that gets any kind of shading, especially if the whole panel is shaded, you'll kill that whole string. So shading is very, very...
Would a leaf do that?
No, not a leaf, no.
Tree?
A tree, yeah, like a spruce tree, yeah, a leaf tree. So shading is not a good thing. You want to make sure you have as minimal as possible. Sometimes though, like, you know, the sun is really strongest from about 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock. So sometimes I get calls from clients, oh, my system's not working. I look at the time, well, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Your system's not going to work. It's going to shut down. There's not enough sunlight. So, so in other words, if the sun, if you're getting your shading late in the day, I should have brought my little tool. I forgot to bring it, but I have a little tool that shows me how much shading you're going to get, what time of year you're going to get the shading, and then what months, what time of day, blah, blah, blah. So I can tell how much shading we're going to get. And typically, if you're only going to get a little bit of shading at the beginning of the day and the end of the day, it usually accounts for 1 or 2, 3%. And it's different for different months. Obviously, in the winter, the sun is lower in the sky, so you get more shading from those things that are blocking you. But in the winter, it's not as critical because you're just not making as much power.
So are these panels moving towards the sun?
Sometimes, yeah. I've installed trackers. I don't do them anymore, but I stopped doing those probably about 5 years ago. I installed like Steve Pelletier's system, Neil Griffith. I don't know if you've ever been on the Caribou Road, leaving Caribou, on the Van Buren Road, leaving Caribou. There's a big system there. It used to be Four Seasons restaurant over there. But,
So you have them angled, right, so that it gets the majority of the sun?
it gets all the sun. So the big thing about the trackers is it'll always keep this panel totally perpendicular to the sun. So 90 degrees to the sun, right? You want the sun to hit this directly. So a lot of times I've seen, recently I've seen a system installed on the north side of a house roof, which is totally ridiculous. But anyway, so it pushes, and I'll show you that. I'll show you what it does if you install it in the wrong location or put not pointing south or not at the right angle. It really affects the output.
You don't use trackers either?
No, no, because it's
If you get more
mechanical.
sun with that,
You do, it's way more expensive.
Okay,
The
it's
trackers are,
just-
no, the tracker itself is very expensive.
okay,
And it's electronics, so
yeah,
Northern Maine, just,
yeah.
I always have issues with anything that turns in Northern Maine. So that's why, one of the reasons I quit wind turbines is always an issue. So,
Basically, they're a maintenance, I've
yeah,
got a
this-
couple of.
there's a lot of maintenance.
And they're a lot of maintenance, basically they're a maintenance nightmare.
Yeah, and the one company I was selling, they put out a really good tracker. I have 2 at my house. Steve Pelletier has 5, and I installed 21 of them for Neil. And they hold 45 of these panels, by the way. It's a pretty big array. So they put out some power, but you're always on them. I
So if
mean,
you get more power with a tracker, but how do you just put more panels up then for an individual that may want
Yeah.
X kilowatt?
Yeah, you just offset it by
Okay.
putting more panels.
Okay.
Yeah, and then the systems I install are maintenance free. Like there's,
Do you get anything from ambient light?
yeah. Oh,
I mean, the inside?
Oh,
light?
like inside lights? Yeah, you probably get something.
You
You
get
probably
some.
put a voltmeter on here, you probably get some power. Well, think about a calculator, right? It's the same thing. It's the same, like a battery,
Yeah.
a solar calculator, you know how you put it up to the
Yeah.
light and it comes on? Same exact thing. It has a little solar panel in it.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing.
Does the snow do any effect to those?
Yeah, so again, shading. So, yeah, you don't want snow.
How about hail?
It's designed for a perpendicular 90-degree hit, 1-inch hailstorm, yeah. So there, honestly, no joke, I'm not gonna do it, but no joke, I've done it before. I could lay this panel on the ground and stand in the middle of it and jump up and down, and I would not be able to break it. Yeah, it's tempered glass, it takes a large shock before it shatters. Now, if you take a little pebble, you know, it's just like your car, it's like your car windshield, right? It's the same thing, like, once it goes, it goes. Like, a lot of times I get shipments, you know, like, the corners are the worst, they'll hit the corner with a forklift, and I'll look at it, it's completely shattered. You know, so, they'll shatter, like, they won't, hairline crack, shatter. So, yeah, so, but they're really rugged.
How would they get invented?
How do they get invented?
Yeah.
I don't know.
What's the biggest panel you can get, like a home or a residential panel?
This is a 122 and a half cell, 72 cell, 144 and a half cell is, it sounds like it's twice the size,
What-
but it is.
How much kilowatts would you get out of one of those?
This is a 330 watt panel.
330
30
okay.
watts,
Is
yeah.
that-
So you could power 300, you could power 300 watt light bulbs with this when it's producing power.
And there's a bigger one than that.
Yeah, I've installed some 480 watts before. That's, and some of them are bifacials, they call them, so they got solar panels on this side, they got solar panels, they got silicone wafers on this side and silicone wafers on this side.
And this is one panel.
This is one panel.
And what would that cost, this one?
This is it's around the same price as what the power output is, so around $303. 2006, this panel didn't exist. The biggest panels I could buy in 2006 were about 175 watts, and they were around $1,000. So that's why wind was so popular, because solar panels are just ridiculously expensive. So now this thing puts out 330 watt, double, and it's costs $300. It's
But
a
then
third
when you
of the price.
invert it, when you invert it, you get less power, right?
Yeah, you get a little bit less power when it's actually converted going to your house. So by the time this 300, okay, so I can explain that. Yeah. We get, I'll show the little chart in front of you. All right, let's go. Oh, let me start from the beginning.
First time was the sun.
No, we've already did the sun, right? We're good on the sun. We know the engine. Now we'll figure out this thing, what this thing is. Okay, so it's made of boron. It's made of silicone. Those little wafers. Remember I said those one little wafer. So that's a silicone wafer. So silicon is found in certain parts of the world in sand, right? It's a silicone sand. Like it's prevalent in the sand. So what they do is they melt it down. They melt the sand down, get the silicone out of it. Silicon out of it, and basically like kind of doing like what you do with gold, right? You burn it off, get the gold out. Well, the same thing with silicon, and they make wafers, and then they call them polycrystalline wafers initially, and monocrystalline is much better. So it's a solid. You see how the way it's not. You've probably seen older style solar panels that kind of like have all a bunch of flecks of different blues and shit. So that's polycrystalline. Mono is better, but it's twice the work because they have to take that, once they melt it down into a nugget, it looks like charcoal, like a silver charcoal. They have to remelt it again to make a monocrystal. And then they take slices of it and make wafers. So it's all made in the labs. So it's super expensive to make, but Chinese have developed it. So most of these panels come from China, or at least parts of them come from China. Some come from North Korea. Germans have some Q-cells. They were engineered in Germany, now they're fabricated somewhere else. But anyway, most of them are Chinese, at least so. Just like LED lights and stuff, it's all Chinese. But anyway, they make a good solar panel, make a good turbine. So the silicon is doped, they call it. So it's combined with boron and phosphorus. Okay. So boron in its outer orbit, here you're looking at the outer one, has 3 electrons in it, and silicon has 4 electrons in it. And phosphorus has 5. So that's kind of important. So if you look at, we're looking at silicon. Oh my god. Silicon. Oh my god. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And boron has so it has this little, when it combines with boron, it forms this little covalent bond, we call it. So it likes that. So it likes to be paired up with its other element next to it. But boron has that 1 extra, right? It has 3. It has 1 missing, so it can't form a covalent bond with this silicon. So it has a hole, it's called. So it's missing an electron. While phosphorus has an extra one. It has 5, so it has this extra freebie here floating around in it. So when you combine those two things together in this, they call it a p-n junction, and all electronics is based on this. Transistors, everything pretty much is all based on this, the way this works. So there's a little region in the middle, it's called the depletion region. So one side is doped with boron, so you get all these little holes here, all these basically, they want to be filled by an electron. They just want, they're just waiting, they're like, please, give me an electron. And the phosphorus has a whole bunch of extra ones. So they're just sitting there going, where do I go? Where do I go? What do I do? Right? So this little gamma particle from the sun that was generated 200,000 years ago finally gets to this silicon wafer, and it says, hey guys, boom, throws in some bunch of the energy into that little p-n junction in the depletion region, and it excites those electrons, and those electrons start going, holy shit, I can move. And they all move over here, right? So that creates, that movement of electrons is current flow, right? So that's basically generating power. So you'll get a difference in potential of these two, that's your voltage. As soon as you get an input in here of sun, it starts generating a difference in potential of voltage, and it starts, if you have a load on here, you have something connected here, those electrons are going to go from here to here and just flow around and come back. So that's how it works. Pretty simple. Questions on that? It looks worse than it is, but that's how it works. That's exactly how it works. So, yeah. Okay, so let's go, okay, let me get back to my little design. Okay, so I want to talk about solar design. So when I get a call from a customer, first thing we figure out is what they need for power. So I looked at your electric bills. The old style bills were much nicer because they had the bottom, they had all the months and all the power that was generated, that was needed during those months. So I could just add those up and say, hey, last year you used so many kilowatt hours. So we need to design a system that generates that many kilowatt hours. So now they have this little bar graph, so you kind of have to estimate what it is. Or you can get a history from them or look at every single electric bill they had. But anyway, first thing to know is what size we're going to need, right? So how many kilowatt hours it needs to generate. Next thing is make sure we have a location. So location is everything. So I usually go, a lot of times my customers are far away, so I don't like to go, you know, you got a lot of tire kickers in this business, and I really don't like to go to people's places, especially like if it's in Pascal, or I had a customer in Levant, and they just don't really want to drive to Bangor just to go check out what they got, and then they say, oh, I don't want to do it. So I'll just use Google Earth, right? So I'll go on Google Earth, and they'll give me the address, and I'll call them up and say, okay, your house is this and this, yeah, okay. Make sure I got the right place, because sometimes the addresses aren't the best. This is actually the Rio Farms, so that's out on where the old drive-in used to be. So, so I look, if I put the panels here, do I have any obstruction? No, probably a good place. So I go from there, and if they're seriously interested, then I'll visit with my little thing and make sure we're good. But this, I'm 100% there's nothing here. We're good there. So that's the second. You know, the second thing. Make sure, you know, I want to know what size, so I can figure out what the cost would be about, just to give them an idea. Because a lot of times that pushes people away. It is expensive up front, but typically it was about an 8-year payback for a homeowner. So in 8 years, that's what I always tell my customers. In 8 years, you would give them that much power, that much money to Versant, and you'll still keep giving that for another 8 years, and another 8 years, and another 8 years.
Yeah, what is
Right?
the longevity of?
It's 25 years, but I've seen solar panels as old as the 70s, and they're still making power. So what happens over time is it's glass, right? It's tempered glass, and it starts to yellow. So the silicone wafer will still produce power forever, as long as you don't damage them. But the glass will yellow, so its efficiency starts to drop. So after 25 years, they're warranty for 25 years, and at the end of 25 years is typically, they're saying that they're going to still generate about 90% power after 25 years. But they'll go further into the future than that. But after 25 years, there'll probably be something newer and better, and you may say, oh, this pole is old. So I've done that already. So for one client, he went from I think there were 220 watt panels, and we put in, I want to say 385 watt panels on the same rack. So all he had to pay me for is the time and the panels, so you know, generate a lot more system. So yeah, same racking, same everything, the same. The conduits were bigger in the ground. I would say that's it.
Is there a limit on where you're going to place the panels, let's say, into where it's going to connect to your home?
Yeah, you don't want to go too far, because the further you are from your point of connection to the house, let's say, a lot of times these systems are standalone. So in other words, I used to have Versant come and set a pole, and I put a meter on the pole, and that meter would offset up to 9. You could offset up to 9 other meters. So, you know, for farmers, you would do it that way, and then it would offset all the potato houses, like 9 of them. For a homeowner, usually connect it right to the house. So. Yeah, I don't like to be more than about 150 feet away, just because it's, you start at if you go further than that, you start losing a lot of power in your lines and the wires, so you have to upgrade the size of the wires, it costs more money. So yeah, you don't want to be too far away from the house.
Are there people putting them on their roof?
Yeah, there's plenty of people that put them on the roof. I don't ever do roof mounts. Not here, nor in Maine.
Because of the snow?
One's for snow reason. Nick,
Yeah, walking. Come sit
have a
here.
seat. Next reason is typically the house roof is never pointing directly south. And then if you have to change your roof, which you have to do around here a lot because of the heat and the cold, you have to pull that all off your roof and put it all back on. That's very expensive. And plus, liability-wise, insurance companies don't like roof mounts because it's roof penetrations, so if they leak. So, yeah, I never installed a tool for that anyway. But.
Are they insurable?
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah.
Is it under your homeowners?
Yeah, it's treated as extra structure, like a garage, like an attached garage or something. So really, insurance is not bad at all on them. I had one customer got hit by lightning, and he had an old style inverter and a new style inverter. I had done 2 systems for him different times, and the old style inverter didn't have this thing called ground fault protection. So the new inverter just blew a little fuse. I changed the fuse, it started back up, worked great. The old inverter fried because it doesn't have that protection for ground faults. So, but not all inverters have ground fault protection for lightning. But That's the only client I've ever had an issue with. One time, got hit by lightning, but never really had claims on it. Another one mowed and threw a rock and busted one of the panels.
So you said you don't like to go over 150 feet?
Yeah,
Geez, that's not far.
far enough. I've had some go further. I've had one go 300
40, 50
feet, but
yards is
a lot
50
more
yards.
money.
Yeah.
The thing is, like, customers don't want to hear a payback of, you know, anything over 10 years, you know, why do it, right? So I always try to keep my payback like 8 years.
How much are you losing going over that? What do you?
You don't lose anything, I just have to keep increasing the size of the wire, and then,
Okay.
so that's a lot more money, and then it's a lot more digging, a lot more time, a lot more conduit, everything's more expensive, and then that throws your payback higher and higher and higher, so, yeah.
So to keep the meter next to that panel, then the sound will just credit you? Is that how that works?
Yeah, yeah, that's the way it works. So that 1 meter will always turn backwards.
It
And
takes power.
what?
They take the power.
Yeah, it goes out on the grid. So any house that's connected to solar, if the system's designed correctly, will send power to the grid. So it'll send power to, it gets connected, how can I say that? So let's say this is my solar box, and this is your house, right? So this connects to your house, but at this point of connection, it's also connected to the utility, right? So power is just going, it's going wherever it wants to go. It just needs to be metered, right? At this, you want this to be metered here, right? So power may go to the utility, may go partial, go to the house. Typically what we say is if the house needs all the power from the solar, it's going to take it all. But reality, it could be coming some there, and then some of this could be going there. It goes wherever it wants to go. But if the house doesn't need as much as this is putting out, it's going to go to utility. You know, it's going to generate no matter where it's going. As long as it's connected, it's going to push to the house or push the utility or both. So it's always, you know, it's always going different directions. So if you don't have enough solar and you're at night, solar's down, your house is going to go power from the utility. During the day, sun is shining, nice and bright, you don't have any lights on, you're just basically, you know, almost not using any power, and then the solar's going to go to the utility. If you're using a lot of power, you're running generator, you're running a compressor, whatever, blah blah blah, the solar's going to go to the house, and extra will go to the utility. So it's just, so that's the way it works pretty much. So the meter's really here, right? 'Cause you just want to know whether it's going this way or whether it's going this way. And that meter turns both directions. That's the difference between a solar meter and a regular house meter. Regular house meter only turns one direction because you're only taking from the grid. Then when you get a solar system, they come and they change the meter and they put a meter that goes bi-directional. It goes backwards when it's feeding to utility and goes forward when it's feeding to the house. And it just keeps track. And if a given month you're overproducing, like say summertime, July, you're overproducing, you'll build a credit. Right? So you'll see a credit on your bill instead of, and you'll pay a minimum bill of usually $9.
How far in advance, how much of a credit will the person power let you have?
It's a 12-month rolling credit. So say you started making power, say in May you were going this way. Oh, all right, so in May you're going this way and at the end of the month in May, you built a credit. Okay, you didn't use as much power as the solar produced, so you have a credit on your bill. You have till next May to make that power you generated this May to use up that power that May.
Otherwise, it will fall
Otherwise,
off.
you lose it. They'll take it.
Yeah, can you give it to a relative, or?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, I mean,
So like if I have to-
well, you have to. When you initially sign up for a solar system and you sign an energy metering agreement, you will have to list, you know, how much percentage wants to go to you and how much percentage wants to go to your brother or whatever.
How common is that?
Pretty common because a lot of times one of the parents will install it and they'll feed both their kids on their system. So So they'll put their kids in
The
your
same rate going in as coming out?
Yeah, it's 1-to-1, yeah. When Paul LePage was in office, he was gonna reduce, he didn't want ratepayers to pay for, you know, he didn't feel right that, how do I say that? They were only gonna credit the power. They didn't feel right about solar systems, because you were using the lines, right? So it didn't feel right about solar system using the infrastructure and getting credit for that. So your bill is half power, half infrastructure, half transmission. So he was gonna cut out the transmission part. So at the end of 10 years, you're only gonna get credit for your power, which is only half of what you generate. So where was I at? Oh my God.
Who regulates that?
Huh?
Who regulates it?
The PUC. Yeah, it's regulated by PUC.
So it's political.
Oh, it's very political, extremely
It could
political.
change tomorrow.
It could change tomorrow. It could. So the way, when Page was in office, he was gonna, anybody that had a system connected before he made this ruling was grandfathered for 15 years. So for 15 years, they were gonna get a 1-to-1 credit. So if you generate 1 kilowatt hour, you get credit for 1 kilowatt hour. But at the end of 15 years, you would have been down to generate 1, get half. You know, but that's only energy you would push back into the grid, right? That's only credits. But, you know, if you're using it, then you're using it. That your meter's not spinning backwards. So, you know, if you're using 1 kilowatt hour in your house and you're generating 1 kilowatt hour, you're using that 1 kilowatt hour. You're not getting it from the public or from some.
Dale, in an average household that burns several hundred kilowatts per month, how many panels would you set up to make that happen?
If your bill is around $120 now, you're looking at about 1 pole, 15 panels.
16 panels.
Yeah. Typical, a lot of the houses, so payback on a 1-pole system is more than a 2-pole system. So
What is pole system?
meaning like 15, like 1 pole, like I don't know if you've seen my systems, but I put them on a pole and there's a big rack on top of a pole and there's 15 or 16 panels on 1 pole. Yeah, and then so a house that uses around $350 worth of electricity, which are the majority of my clients, they'll have 2 poles. And they get a better payback than a 1-pole system, because a 1-pole system is pretty much all the same work, but you only get half the system.
How many, what do you have household burn per month?
I mean, it varies house to house, but main public, the reverse end says about 600 kilowatt hours
Per month.
That's the average you mean, or what?
Yeah, but it's, I mean, that's
Yeah.
their average. Everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
So I have some houses that I did systems. I won't do a system like sometimes I get calls, I'm like, how much, you know, I always start off, what's your electric bill? About $80. Well, not worth it. It's not worth it. I mean, your payback's gonna be like 20 years. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. If your bill is, you know, 120 plus, yeah, okay. You know, 100, like 1-pole system, you're probably looking at 10-year payback, 2 poles about 2 years.
If you have multiple meters, that one panel, you finish those meters.
Correct.
Those bills.
Yeah, you credit all your, yeah, so I do that a lot for farmers. They'll have crazy big systems. I don't know if you've been on Hillside Road in Senegat, there's a big system in there with Reeves. So they started out with 1 system, basically a trial system. They didn't believe me. But anyway, and they're like, okay, it does work. Wow, okay, so they did another system. And then this year we finished up another system, but it's been sitting there since June and it's not connected to the grid because Versant is being a really, they formed this new group this year called the DG Group, Distributed Generation Group, and it's out of Bangor, and they basically threw my systems in with those big crazy systems that they're installing everywhere, and it's taking forever. It used to take me, like last year, I'd do a system like Liberty Farms, and I would call the local planner, who happens to be one of my good friends. I worked with him when I was in Presque Isle, and I say, hey, I got a system coming up. I should be done probably July, 2nd week of July. Okay. I'd show up, you know, build this system at the end of June, the poles were already set, the line was already run, just needed to be connected. I'd call them up, I'd say, okay, it's all done, okay, you come and look at it, okay. Within a day or two, most of the time, it was connected. Now, that's been sitting there since June, and it's not even connected, and it's looking, now the customer has to pay for everything. So, like Labrie Farms, they had to go from 25 kVA transformers, 3 of them, this 3-phase system, and go to 50 kVA transformers, and that's it. They don't have to run any wire, you don't have to do anything, you just have to change the transformers. $15,000 just to do that. And it's their transformers. It's not even, you don't even get to keep the transformers. It's still theirs, but you gotta pay them 15 grand. And then,
When did that
1 year.
change? When did that change?
It just did this year. It just did. Actually, some of my systems I snuck in at the beginning of the year. Because I did one for the Voisin brothers, and they came, and they set the pole, they ran the wire, changed the transformer, $4,600 bucks. Labrie Farms, I'll talk about Labrie Farms, because we're a friend of mine, so. And I wouldn't care if I talk about them, but there's another client that's in the same boat. But anyway, they won't do anything. Like, if I have to set a pole, I have to set the pole. If I have to run wire, I have to run wire, and the customer has to pay for it all. So, and so that just changed this year. So, luckily, the Voisin brothers, I was able to install their system, and they came and set the pole, ran the wire, did all that, $4,600 bucks, fairly reasonable. And now it's changed transformers, $15,000. My other client, same thing, changed one transformer, run 100 feet of wire, $15,000 bucks. I don't know this specific number, 15,000. Doesn't even make sense. So now the problem is because of Florida and this whole, nobody's working, nothing's happening, G plants operating 50% capacity, you order a panel, it takes like a year now. Well, transformers are 1 year out, and they won't use their transformers. You have to order one. So these systems are going to sit there for at least another year before they even get connected. So 2 years. So who the hell wants to install a solar system and wait 2 years for it to be connected? And now they're telling me...
There's 2 more years gone.
Yeah, now they're telling me it's going to be maybe 2 to 4 year wait time for transformers. So, but to the utilities thing too, they're stressed out because if they have any like big storm or anything, and Florida happened at the wrong time, so that made it even worse. So they're saying if they have a storm, they might not have a transformer, so people won't even be able to get connected for years. Back to the storm, yes.
Referring to Florida.
With the hurricane, yeah, went through a lot of utility equipment there. There's just
See that
available.
next to
Yeah.
You want to hear a good one?
Yeah, sure. Give me a good. Talk, so you be talking.
I ordered a Ford Maverick January 19th. Still waiting.
Oh yeah, I believe it. It's crazy. Everything's crazy.
And not had a big deposit. We're still waiting on it.
Yeah, I believe it.
Do you need a permit from the township?
Yeah, some towns aren't as. Some towns are pretty lenient. They don't really care. Most you need a permit, a building permit. They need an electrical permit, but the electricity is not.
Question that Wallagrass has got a proposition that they're looking at for putting the solar panels in.
Jim Bouchard's pit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got the letter from the power company out of Pennsylvania or New Jersey, someplace down there, and or North Carolina. He came up and he met with the planning board and wanted to get building permit. And it didn't get really all that specific, other with looking at the building permits and getting the site ground level and all the FLIR permits and those kinds of things. But I guess the question that I had was, it sounds like it's almost a great win situation all the way around. But then you read a few of the articles that lately have been in the paper of who's getting the benefit.
Oh, it's nobody getting the benefits
For these systems, and sure, you can get your credit, and the company does this and that, and it's like, why wouldn't you get it? Because there's free money out there to put it up. But it's like the money's not going to be coming back to you. It's going to be coming back to their company who's managing this.
Yeah, so most of those, the big systems that are being installed, okay, so we'll talk about that for a second. So those big systems are being installed, most of them are investor-owned, so sometimes owned by hedge funds. So, and a lot of them are not even from the States, like these companies installing these systems. But, not a fan. But they're there to make money. They're getting tax credits, they're getting grants, you know, to install this. They're the ones that are going to reap the benefits. They're offering local customers, like, I think it's 50 up to 15% off their electric bill, but that's also kind of being recorded. They're not being truthful about what that 15% actually is, I feel. So there's a thing called feed-in tariff rate, and that's what they get when they feed power into the grid, and that's what the rate they get, which could be different than your rate. So they're going to give you the 50% of the feed-in tariff rate. So it doesn't necessarily equate to what you're going to get for an actual 50% off your bill.
So Dale, what are you saying that you don't think it's, that they're giving us the right numbers? Because, you know.
Because the rates are different. They're saying you get 15% off your electric bill.
Okay, but if their contract says they're going to be 15%.
Read the fine print.
I didn't see no 15, I just saw 10%.
Yeah, some only got 10. If you're the first one get 10, but. So supposedly, I've never seen a contract, so I'm not 100%, but I have somebody that's in the business and he says it's 15% off the feed-in tariff rate. So the feed-in tariff rate is set by the PUC. So it is different than your residential rate. It's two different rates. So you may not see that much of a difference as you would expect. But anyway, the people that are real, I mean, you're still kind of. So they're putting these big systems. So there's one on the St. John Road. There's one on in Fort Kent. There's one on the St. John Road. There's one going in on the French Road. Right. So they're using all the substation capacity for renewables when they install those big systems. So what does that mean? So that means that if you as a homeowner says, I want to install a 5 kW system on the St. John Road, I can't do it. Because the only way to do it would be for you as a customer to pay to upgrade the transformers in the substation to a level to accept your 5K, because they've already maxed out the substation. So that's the problem I'm running into right now. Is I can't install any more systems on the St. John Road, I can't install any systems on the Frenchville Road, and now there's systems going in on the Route 11, that'll be done too. So I'm done installing solar in this area because of those systems. So it's supposed to promote solar, it does, I mean, it's installing solar, but it's not promoting.
But residential, you're
money.
You're screwed, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really sad, so it's killed my business, but it's done.
Where's the electricity going? Who's buying the electricity?
Well, they're trying to get everybody to sign up for their, you know, they're trying to, right, 10-15% off.
So it's being used locally?
Yeah.
So
We're not tied to they can't feed it to Canada. We're tied, that's why they're trying to make that connection. So that got approved, so they're looking at someone to actually build it. So there needs a connection from, not Smyrna, but.
Basically,
Patton,
right?
Yeah, down to Millinocket. So that connection, it's like 50 miles of no line connection. So we're not actually, we're in our own little territory up here. We get power through Madawaska from Canada, from Quebec Hydro. So, and Quebec Hydro. So we get power from Canada, it comes to Aroostook County, all the way down to Island Falls, and that's where it stops. So even if they put up all these solar systems, they can't push it back to Canada. So they're trying to make that connection so they can feed it to the grid. And then once they feed it to the grid, they can get renewable energy credits, it's called. So for every megawatt hour of power you generate, it's one SREC, they call it. So it's a solar renewable energy credit, and they can sell that to Massachusetts and Northwest still buy it. They make a lot more money. So they're pushing hard for that. So that's going to happen just because all these systems are moving. They're going to lobby to get it done. But Yeah, so right now it's staying locally, but I don't see any of these, most of these are not getting connected for a long time. Because of the transformers.
So if it's not local, how come the electricity is so expensive? They blamed it on the price of gas and that we're getting it through a
Well,
Canada.
for them, the way they make money is they get paid to feed in that, so they get a feed-in tariff rate. So they're pushing energy into the grid to feed all customers. And they're trying to get people to sign up so they can make more money. You know, they get a little bit better rate when they're feeding your house because now they're getting, they're selling you power at 50% less than what you're paying for the residential rate. So they're making more power, they're making more money selling it to you than feeding it to the grid. So, anyway, but they're not going to give you, whatever.
Are you doing the one in French River?
Oh, no, I don't do big systems.
There's one in, near the St. David, near the
Yeah,
St. David
yeah, there's some
post office
Madawaska
also.
guy, there's some everywhere.
Some,
Going
yeah, going up all
everywhere.
over the
And
place.
Caribou and Prescal is crazy. They're everywhere. Every little road you take, oh, holy shit. So anywhere where there's three phase, anywhere. Oh, yeah, Paul.
You say now that the up to 2 year more waiting time for all these systems, materials in order to go from groundwork to finish. So you probably can't even quote a price in a residential
Oh, no, no.
unit.
I couldn't quote a price because I can't even install it. So if they're in Fort Kent, anywhere in Fort Kent, I can't even install it.
Okay.
I can't
So
do
we
it.
lucked out.
You did. You did. I'm telling you, you did. Because I have a level 1, which is I was going to install a system for the town of Fort Kent, and it's 2 level 1s, and they won't approve it. It's beyond the capacity of the substation.
Because of the transformer.
But no, it has nothing to do with transformer, that's a whole other issue. So the utility transformers, you just can't get them. And right now, it looks like a 2 to 4 year wait. So if you install a system, you might be waiting 4 years to get the transformer to get it connected. So who the hell wants to do that? So same thing with inverters, that's a big problem too. Like I used to use, I pretty much strictly use Fronius inverters. They're a really, really good company. They're an Austrian company. And they've been doing, they started out making welders back in the 40s, and they started making inverters, I think, 60s or 70s, something like that. They're a really, really good company. They make an awesome welder, very expensive welder, but anyway, their chip manufacturer was in Ukraine. So their warehouse went to shit, and so their whole solar line they stopped making. And one of my off-grid inverters that I love to use, it's a company out of Washington State. They couldn't find any chip manufacturers for their computer boards, so they stopped their whole production line. And to get parts for one of my inverters, if I had one fail, I was like, holy shit. And I called my repair rep for the company in New Hampshire, and he says, 20 to 30 month lead time on parts. 20 to 30 months. But he said, but luckily, he had one board in his basement. And I was like, he says, what unit? I said, 44, 48. He said, oh my God, I think I have one board in my basement. I'll go check. And he did. I was like, 20 to 30 months? It's crazy right now. It's
So
insane.
if you're a good friend with Fortin, they might be able to put up.
You might be able to change your agreement. Yeah.
Do you know what Versant is charging per kilowatt?
What do you mean charging for kilowatt?
Well,
Oh, yeah.
like the typical, like my friend.
Yeah, it's like, right now, transmission and power is like 21 cents a kilowatt hour, and it's going up. The energy part's going up 40%, I think, something like that, and here starting in July, I want to say. So another 20%, basically half your bill is going up 40%, so your whole bill is going up another 20%, another 4 or 5, another 4 or 5.
So you could conceive
cents.
not 20%.
It's going to be like 26 cents a kilowatt hour
26
here
a
in
kilowatt hour.
July.
Well, the reason
crazy.
I'm asking is that I live in Van Buren.
Yeah.
And of course, we have our own power
Yeah.
company here and whatever. And
What are you guys paying?
raw, just the kilowatt itself, 6.5.
Okay, that's just the power part?
That's just power part.
And what do you pay?
And
So
the
you-
transmission part is roughly about 4 to 5 cents.
Oh, you're freaking
Oh,
lucky.
my goodness.
You're lucky. Don't put a solar system in. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You're getting.
For, like my home, I use typically, because I have a couple heat pumps, and my wife likes the lights on. I'm
Yeah.
between 8 and 1,000 kilowatts usage per
Yeah.
month. So I figure I'm about 12 to 14,000 a year.
Yeah. That's
And
nothing.
based on what I'm paying right now from Van Buren Light Power, is it worthwhile for me to make that kind of investment?
No, it isn't. It isn't. To be honest with you, it isn't, because your payback would probably be like 20 years. Because I'm dealing with Versant customers who are paying 21 cents a kilowatt hour.
That's worth it.
Half of what you're paying. So their payback is going to be twice as much as yours. So their payback, 8 years, yours would be 16 years.
Is there any advantage to stay with DC and just go off grid completely?
No. No, because batteries are just so expensive. So a typical off-grid system, first of all, an off-grid system to feed a typical house would cost you probably $100,000 to install. Yeah, so an off-grid, typically an off-grid house has propane dryer, propane stove, propane heat, propane refrigerator, so everything's propane, so they're not using almost any power. It's just lights, their water pump, microwave for a few seconds. Water pump only runs a couple of minutes a day, so they don't have a lot of electric load. So typical house, typical camp that I do, or small house in the woods, is still about 30 grand, 30 to 40 grand. It's still expensive. It's batteries. It's like $12,000 just batteries. Yeah.
While you're on the off-grid, I'm curious, a small off-grid system for a little camp. What's your thoughts on a solar generator versus batteries?
A solar generator? What do you mean?
Well, I'm not too familiar with it, but I've seen, like I've got a gas generator for my house.
Yep.
They have generators that are solar powered.
Oh, yeah, they have like a little solar panel. It's like 1 unit, whatever.
Yes, but
Yeah.
to have something decent.
You're not going to get much out of it. They're really usually tiny outputs. You may have power your lights probably for a certain amount of time, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I'm just thinking a little LED lights.
Yeah, it'd be good for something like that. So a lot of times I'll send I don't really install little systems, so I send a lot of my customers to Northern Tool or Amazon, because it's a lot of money to be set up. But most of the systems I do in the woods are actual houses, and they need power, so they need, and then when you're in the woods, I don't recommend propane generators. I always, try to buy diesel generators, so now those generators are like $12,000. You have a $12,000 bank of batteries, it just adds up and adds up. It's very expensive off-grid. But once they're set up, they still save a lot of money compared to running a generator 24/7.
What's the average price for a grid, average family or home?
Average house for 50.
2 years ago, 2 years ago, I could do one for like a little under 30, like a 2-panel system, but now it's like 50.
2-panel system, you said?
Yeah, 2-pole system.
2-pole. And how much is on a pole? How many are on a pole, or kilowatts?
15 or 16, or it's usually a 10 kilowatt system.
How much? What was that?
10 or 11 kilowatt system. So it's a lot of water.
But your payback would be less today because oil is
Yeah,
$6 a gallon.
so everything went up in price, just like everything else, right? Everything went up in price. So, but luckily for me is electricity went up in price significantly too. I mean, we were paying, a little under 16 cents a kilowatt hour. Now we're paying 21, and now we're going to be paying 25. Well, that helps people with making sure that your payback stays around 8 years. So really, my payback hasn't changed from 2 years ago to now because electricity went up so much. So the payback stayed the same.
With all of these solar fields being set up and so forth, there's going to be a saturation point at some point where eventually the price, market pressures will force it to go back down, or do these electric companies like Versant and Central Fire Power see a little cash cow that we're not realizing?
I don't I don't foresee your rates going down, not in the percent territory. It's only going up. It's not going down. And they're there to make money. They don't give a shit about you. You know what I mean? They really don't, especially this company. It was different with Maine Public Service because I was locally, it was still listed on the NASDAQ, but it was still operated by local people and it was owned, basically still run by local people. So I feel like when I worked there, they cared a lot more about the customers and stuff like that. But Versant is a big company. They really don't care about anybody.
Yeah, but aren't they by regulation?
They really don't. What?
Aren't they by regulation only allowed to make a certain profit per year?
Yeah, they
A
submit
certain
their,
percentage per year profit?
they send their recommendation, they send their price increase recommendation to PUC approves or denies it, but they approved it. So pretty much they just gotta plead, oh, we're running out of money. Prove it on paper and it's approved.
When you talk about the disaster in Florida, right next to Fort Myers is a complete solar powered city that went through the same hurricane and had no damage.
Well, you're lucky. Anyway, okay, so where are we at on this whole thing? I never even finished my setup here. What the hell? Sidetrack. Okay, so you have a little, I wanted to talk about that. So when I design a system, first of all, I make sure you got a good location, check out what size you need, figure out how many kilowatt hours, and I go to this little piece of paper that's on your desk there, this from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. So it's a website I go to, and they tell me, and you know, if you look at all this here, up here, it says, you know, this, if I input Caribou. So it uses all the data from all the solar irradiation data, which is basically since the National Weather Service has been in Caribou, they have all that statistical data, and so they can give me a really accurate number. If I punch in an 8 kilowatt system, Premier panels, which they all are pretty much now, and I do a one-axis tracker, which means I can tilt it on one axis. It'll tell me pretty much what it's going to generate, and it's been really accurate. So this is an average year. So if I look at an 8 kilowatt system, it's going to generate, I don't remember what, this was at 17 cents a kilowatt hour, so that's a little old, but it'll generate 13,000 kilowatt hours in a year. So I can look at your electric bill and say, okay, I just keep punching in the different kilowatt size I need, and it'll tell me, okay, I needed 12,000, this is a little over, close enough. So that's the size I need for your house, 8 kilowatt. So then I say, okay, I need an 8 kilowatt system. Then I go back and figure out what size inverter I need. And so inverters are matched. They have to operate in a certain range. So it needs a certain amount of panels with a certain amount of strings. So sometimes 8 kilowatt, I can't get to 8 kilowatt hours. So 8 kilowatt system. Sometimes I have to go an 8.5 or a 7.5 or something. I have to go somewhere in the range to get the right amount of panels with the right size inverter. So it's kind of a little trick. Each inverter company has on their website basically a design tool, and I have to go there and figure out, you know, what the match is and input a bunch of data, and then it says, okay, you know, this 10 kilowatt inverter, you can put 2 strings of 15 400 watt panels on it, and it will generate just the perfect amount of power, and it will be operating at 97% efficiency. So if you don't do what it says, it'll either not operate correctly or operate at a very bad efficiency. So that's where that NADCEP certification comes in. The average person has no clue how to do that. So average electrician, you don't get taught that in school or anything, so they would never know how to do that correctly. So you want to get someone that's NADCEP certified. Okay, so this is one-axis tracking, the solar azimuth. The azimuth is the angle it's pointing at. So we want to be directly south, so 180 degrees. And I put a rate tilt 45. So spring and fall, which is like March 21, whatever, spring, whatever we call it. Whatever. Equinox, yeah. Thank you. So spring and fall, and then the fall is September 21. Those months you want to tilt your panels to 45 degrees because the sun is 45 degrees on the horizon. So it's going to hit hit the sun, that's not, yeah, you're gonna hit the sun with your sunlight totally, or at a direct 90-degree angle, totally perpendicular, you get the maximum output. So in the winter, December 21, you want to tilt it 15 degrees up. So you want to be like at 65 degrees, but usually I say don't go more than 55 because the winds could affect it. It is a big sail, right? So you want to be at a steeper angle. So that's one thing nice about installing it on a pole is that steep angle. In the winter, the snow doesn't stay on it. If it does stay on it, it'll be on there a few days in the sunlight. As soon as the sun comes out, it'll melt and slide off.
But the sun's lower in it.
Yeah, so your panels need to be steeper.
Oh, okay.
So your sun's lower on the horizon,
Yes,
so
yes,
your panels have to be steeper. Yeah, so in the summer, your sun's higher, you want to be at minus 15 degrees from, you want to be at like 32 degrees. So, lean back more because the sun's higher in the sky. So,
Do you reposition them every year?
what?
Are they repositioned every year?
4 times a year, you had to get maximum output. So positioning it 4 times a year gets you about 20% more output compared to fixed at 45 degrees. So that's another reason why I like to install them on poles is you get more output, 20% more output. So if we look at, I generated a couple different ones. So sometimes people say, why can't I point one east and one west? No, you want to always be pointing south. So if you point one east, you end up with 33% loss. So you don't want that, right? So it'd be the same thing pointing west. So you always want to be pointing directly south, always. So that's why I saw the system on the north side of a house, and I almost freaked out because I was like, people like that give the industry a bad name, right? You don't want to do that. You never install that system.
True south.
Huh?
True south.
You want to be true south. Yeah, we'll go over that in a second. But okay, let's go over that right now, which is while I remember. So on your other thing, there's a little sheet angle of declination. So the Earth is tilted, right? So you got your north pole and it's tilted at an axis, right? So damn, that's a bad. Jeez. It's an egg.
Want some water?
Anyway, let me draw a nicer Earth. I'll try. Just sing it. Just sing it, Herman.
It's like an egg.
Yeah, it's an Easter. You think of Easter.
Okay, it's a little bit better. All right, so the Earth tilted axis, there's your North Pole, and there's your South Pole, right? And the Earth is basically a big magnet. Okay, it's a big, because of the center of the core is molten metal, molten iron, and anything rotating causes a magnetic field. So, again, the northern lights, when all these particles come back from the sun, they interact with the magnetic field of the Earth, and that's what creates the northern lights. So the magnetic field of the Earth protects us from all kinds of gamma radiation, all kinds of radiation from outer space. If we didn't have that, we would all die from radiation poisoning. So magnetic field is very important. That's why if the Earth ever stopped spinning, well done. It did, we'd all die. So say we're here, true south is this way. It's not this way, but a compass will point this way, right? Because the compass will line up with the magnetic field, but because of the tilt of the Earth. So if you look on that little angle of declination, you see that we are about 17 degrees difference. So whenever I look at a compass, I have to change the angle 17 degrees.
So does that mean,
Oh, that's not.
so,
The instructor didn't let me have it. Okay, what?
so what we consider south is not the warmest, is not south?
It's not south. No, if you take a compass and look at, and it's pointing south, it's not really south. It's pointing to magnetic south. So it's pointing pointing here, right? Because the Earth is tilted. So south is on the tilt. So we're concerned with having this true south, not this.
But you can adjust your compass.
Yeah, you adjust the compass.
Declination.
Yeah.
There's a spot on it.
Yeah. But you gotta know how to operate it.
So where is the actual true south?
True south?
Yeah.
South. The 17 degrees difference.
When I was learning how to fly, we had magnetic north.
Yep.
In your compass, and we had true north, which was a little bit above.
Yeah, 17 degrees difference.
Right, which was above the magnetic north. That
Yeah.
was it. The same principle applied to the south.
Yes.
To the southern nation.
Yep. Still at 17 degrees. Okay, so yeah. So when I go there, I use my little tool that I have. It's just a little, it's a little piece of plastic, basically, a little dome. It shows me all the, it has a little chart on it, and it shows me all the shading and different times of the year, and percentages of what shading would be. And it also has an adjustment for magnetic and true south. So I just use that and pretty much right on the line. I always, sometimes if I use a regular compass, I don't really trust them too much. So what I'll do is I'll find out what time the sun is at high noon. So most of the time in the summer, it's around 12:30 because of daylight savings time. It's actually shifted ahead. So I have a chart. It tells me when the sun will be true south at what time. And I'll just look at the shadow and look at my panels and say, yep, they're pointing directly at the sun. And that's the actual best way to do it. But my little tool works great, but sometimes it's... Okay, so everything's based on my fixed rack at 45 degrees, 100 pointing directly south. So we saw that we've got 21% more output if we want one axis tracking. If we go to 0 degree tilt, so if we put like a lot of commercial systems, like I helped install a system at a readiness center in Presque Isle. That system is roof mounted on a flat roof, and the panels are literally, you can't get a steep, since it's a flat roof membrane, you have to use ballast to hold the racking down, so basically cement blocks. So you ballast all the racking, but you can't tilt the panels up a lot because the wind will just blow them off the roof. So the panels are literally like a 10 degree tilt. So if you tilt your panels, if your panels are laying flat, you'll get 22% loss. So that's a big thing, right? You want to be at 45 degrees if you have a fixed panel. You don't want to be at crazy.
So a lot of the solar farms, their panels are, they're really not supposed to air much a lot of that, right?
Yeah, a lot of them aren't. A lot of them are like 30 degrees or so. They don't, I don't know.
And that is stationary that way? The computer...
Yeah, some of them, the one on the French Railroad is actually a single axis backtracking system. So the panels will follow the sun, but at the end of the day, it'll actually tilt backwards. So they follow the sun both directions. And I'm pretty sure they're faced east-west instead.
During the storm, they're flat.
Pretty big.
But yeah, during the day, they're flat. Yep.
During the storm?
During the so trackers follow the sun from, like mine wake up around 6 o'clock in the morning before the sun comes up. So when the sun comes up, they're already in position. They sleep at night flat top. Actually, they sleep at 15 degrees. And then they wake up in the morning, they're smart, it's computer controlled, and they'll tilt down and turn and be ready for the sun when it first rises, and then they'll follow the sun through the day, tilting and turning at the same time. And at night, when the sun goes down, then they'll go back to sleep mode. So they're pretty smart. In the winter, they'll snow dump, they call it, so they'll go at a really steep angle first, dump the snow, and then they'll go to tracking. But yeah, they're a pain in the butt, really. So
Probably more money too.
they're a lot more money, and then the problem is a lot of times they're like a Neil Griffith system. Someone took over the system for me because I was like, I'm retiring. I really don't want to drive down there all the time for these trackers. Anyway, he's got like 5 down. So when they're down, they can't be facing the sun because wind. So they have a little anemometer on them. So if the wind speeds get above 25, 30 miles an hour, they'll go flat top again. So a lot of times these things are sleep flat. They're always, a lot of times they're flat top because it's a little too windy or there's an issue with the computer. So, to me, you're almost getting more output just having this crank up one axis tracker because that's always good. Wind doesn't matter. It's rated for 90 mile an hour wind. So don't ever let that go 90 miles an hour. Usually I tell them, like, if you're going to hear a storm 50 miles an hour, stow them, put them back flat, because I wouldn't want to test it. Too expensive to test. That's it. Any guys got any questions for me? It's enough, right? I talked enough?
I guess I'm not gonna get solar panels.
Sorry I discouraged everybody, but, it's not a good time, unfortunately. I think a year ago, I'd have never told you that. A year ago, I was like, yeah, let's do some more. But
I was getting a lot of advertisements in the mail, just like the political advertisements about solar farms and how it's gonna help. And
Yeah.
I thought, gee, I wonder, where do I get the information about this? But I think you've covered it.
Yeah.
Takes a lot of cropland out of production also.
That's
Yeah.
another question.
Yeah, like everything else, when you get those big companies, they're looking to make their own money, right? They're not here to help the whole, they're not doing this for you guys. They're doing this for their bottom line, And most of them, like I said, are best
call
qualified.
them.
Huh?
I did call them,
Oh, you did?
and it was like talking to a telemarketer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, it's, some percentage off your bill is better than none, but if, especially this day and age, it's hard to, I mean, maybe things will change in, 4 or 5 years, but.
I know the one here in Frenchville, where I worked in summer, the owner was approached, offered them 15% and this and that, and so when he was all done his spiel, I got to talking to him and stuff. And he told me that they were not going to build the field, but to build the farm until they had enough customers to consume the amount of electricity these panels were going to put out.
Yeah.
So they were doing a real hard blitz.
Yeah,
And a real hard sell.
They went to a lot of businesses and stuff.
To sign up customers for this.
I heard
Where they built the farm.
Yeah, a lot of, they're saving a little bit on their bills, better than saving nothing, you know what I mean? So, I mean, the best thing would be to install your own system and
Thank you, we did.
get the real, you know.
How much is it like that? They lease it usually 20, 25 years, so I got a lot of my farmers that, they're doing some. They must get paid by the solar panel, or did they get paid by the acre?
What do you mean?
These companies that lease
It's by
the
the
landowner,
acre. It's by the acre,
by the acre.
yeah.
Do you know about how much that is?
Yeah, it's quite a bit, actually. It's like $2,000 an acre per year.
So you get 5 acres, you get 10,000 a year for 25 years, so,
Yeah, it's a good deal.
yeah.
It's a good deal, but,
No,
I mean,
that's
it's gotta be land that you're willing to.
Yeah, because once they build it, you can't farm it anymore.
Yeah, and then, like, how can I say that? What happens, these are owned by investors, or what happens 15 years down the road and they say, it's not profitable anymore. Then you're left with that in your field.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They go bankrupt, right?
Right.
That's what they do.
Right.
They just file bankruptcy.
And then who's
they-
responsible for the
Farmer,
recycling?
farmer, take it out.
That would be in the fine print.
You gotta read the fine print.
Yeah, that's
Like I have one of my friends, he's looking to lease some of his property, and I said, make sure that they put money away now to decommission it.
Yeah.
Don't say, it's gonna be who cares what's written on paper if they go bankrupt? That means nothing, it's a piece of paper. Have it in an escrow account, they have,
Yeah.
$100,000 in the escrow account to demolish it later. You know what I mean?
I'm on the town council this year, and we were looking at, solar farm and whatever. So I went to a couple seminars from the Maine Municipal Association, and one seminar was with lawyers who deal with solar energy projects. And these investors, when they come in, of course, they've got bundles of cash to hand out to the landowner or whoever they buy the property from, or lease it from, or whatever. But this PUC and the solar people have tightened up on some of the regulations, and these investors now have to have an exit plan after the life of the farm. And, be it 20, 25 years, 30 years, and so forth. And if they decide, if the landowner decides that they want to decommission, the investors have to remove all of the infrastructure that's been put there, and return the land.
What if there's no more investors though?
But if there's no more investor, then it falls upon the landowner.
Right, a
But-
plan is worth nothing unless there's money to put aside for it.
But what I understood from the lawyers and the way they were talking is that the investors now have to put the money up front
That'd be good.
to guarantee or to ensure that at the end of whatever term it may be,
They file bankruptcy, we do this
Yeah, if they file bankruptcy, then, yeah, big deal, but.
But if the money's going in an escrow account, that's what it's for,
Yeah.
that's good. It's got to
What's that?
be protected.
You began your talk very interesting regarding nuclear reactors.
Yeah.
What's the future of nuclear power? I mean, when you described that, it sounded like a pretty nice little system.
It is, but it's...
You know, you figure that submarine could go for how many years?
15 years.
Put that in my car.
With nothing. They haven't built, and I think they built one new plant like not too long ago. Not sure where, I forget. But anyway, yeah, there's just not building. It's just so controversial, you know, with what happened at 3 Mile Island, what happened in Orlando. But those are different reactors, you know, but...
Are we working on fusion?
Yeah. Yeah, we are. Yeah. They've sustained like reactions, but I mean, it's a lot of energy input to get.
Well, they heard it in 1 second.
Yeah. Yeah. But they are working on it. But it's, you know, it takes obviously a lot of pressure and temperature to get there. But, yeah. Anything else?
Any more questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Problem.
Just an announcement that our last class will be next Tuesday, the 22nd, and it's going to be at the Senior Center, and it's going to be Don Levesque is going to be speaking to us. He's going to be telling us some stories. So next Tuesday at Senior Center at 6 o'clock. Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.